Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the CollabCast. I'm Katie Cusack. I'm here with David King.
Hey.
And we are here to talk about what we've been up to and to introduce a very exciting podcast episode we have with Foisy, who's going to be writing a music column for us in the upcoming print magazine that you will see in January. Yeah. It's coming out in January.
It is coming out in January. It's getting very real for us here. And we hope very real for all of you, too. There's even a poster in the Proctor's lobby.
Come find it. Take a picture with it. It looks really good. Nadine Medina is on it from Troy Dance Factory, and you'll get to find out why in our print issue and online when we have our website finally all set up.
And Nadine is also going to be a columnist with us, and she has quite a lot to say about being a member of the creative force in the region and how to take sort of care of yourself and as a creative and value your work, which I think is really important. And that's sort of one of the reasons Andre is a columnist with us too, because he's in this band called Locrian, very experimental sort of metal, if you want to call it that, but I don't think most people would, on Relapse Records. And he came to the area pursuing his real job as an academic, but he is still in this crazy band, which is probably set to release a record within the next year. And he just finished up this pretty experimental project called Bad Star at Virginia Tech, which was a musical installation. So he has a lot of experience, not only in the sort of the mainstream of working with labels and things like that, but also in securing grants and DIY issuing, making your own records and mailing them to fans. And so his span of knowledge is really interesting, and he offers an interesting perspective because he comes from, although he was born in technically upstate New York, he left the area and now is living in Albany. So I think the conversation was wide.
It covers a lot of different things. We talk about upstate. We talk about what it's like to make a record and the creative power and sort of thought process that goes behind it and how much time that can take or not take. And all the different things has done in his musical career, sort of walk through that timeline with him. And, sort of the trends he's noticed in his time in Albany, the things he likes and doesn't like.
It gets a little controversial. So for the faint of heart, if you're a hardcore fan, but,
it's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Fine, everyone relax.
Don't at me after you watch the episode.
Or do.
Maybe that's why I put it up there. But anyway, so ouch. I don't know if I should have said what I said in the episode, Katie. You have me shook.
It's already said.
Yeah.
Can't edit it. It's a one take go here. That's how we roll.
So we'll be out soon. The website will be up soon. And if you look at some of these videos with, say, Andre and with John Kring, that came out last week, and you think, hey, that makes sense, and I have something to say about being a creative, you should reach out, because we really do want to get into the nuances of functioning as a creative person in the region, and not only the art involved, but the economics. We were recently talking about the impact of, and Katie, do not glare at me, but about the impact of whether to work for, sort of a bad boss to get your mission done, to sort of keep going in your field, and what sacrifices do you make to keep that going? Where do you, sort of draw the line? Things like that creatives have to think about. And, what are you willing to do to continue making your art? So we really want to get into those deeper conversations, and I think it's important that you're all involved. So
and recognizing that within each genre of art in this area, there are a lot of different pockets of people and different communities, and we want your voice too. So please, write a sample column for us, because just because we have one columnist for film, for music, for dance, doesn't mean that that's our only one that we want writing for us. We want everyone to be involved as much as possible. So keep sending them in, because we want to hear from you.
And we're also hosting, we'll be hosting one piece of original artwork or reproductions of in our physical issues. So if you are an artist, if you're a gallery owner, if you are just a collector and you want to show off some of your stuff, get in touch. We don't really have any framework for what we're accepting at this point.
It's pretty open. We want to just see what you've collected or what you've made, and if you're particularly proud of it, or if you have a really interesting story to go along with it. Obviously we want to hear that too. Just a little description of your art and why you made it, and what your process is. Send it along, because that's going to be featured prominently in the book.
Prominently?
Yeah, it is. It has its own little page as of now. So.
And forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We will we'll be back next week with maybe 2 or 3 columnists, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Yeah, we're definitely going to keep introducing all the people who are going to be collaborating with us.
Ouch. Fade to black. Today we're joined by Andre Foisy, who is a member of sort of pretty well-known band, Locrian. You're signed to Relapse?
Correct.
And long-running experimental avant-garde quasi-metal band. Your music is often compared to Godspeed You Black Emperor, but I wouldn't say that it's got the tonal similarities. It's more synth-heavy and esoteric in some ways. I mean, but anyway, I don't know why I'm describing your music to you, but so you're a recent arrival in the area, and I know you grew up in upper upstate.
Yeah.
Upper upstate.
So, yeah. I'm going to make that shirt.
Yeah, I like that better.
But so tell us a little bit about what brought you back to the area. And I should say you're going to be writing a column for us on music. And I think part of the reason that it's so intriguing to me to have you writing for us is obviously you've dealt with the industry, but on so many different levels in terms of, you're in sort of a performing and recording band, but you're also involved in a lot of experimental projects and you have quite a network. And one of your first columns sort of deals with rediscovering some of the folks you know locally when you moved back. So what was that like? What was it like coming back to the area for the first time, and how are you settling in?
It was really cold initially. I moved here during January last year.
Oof.
So it was just like the coldest time of the year to start moving furniture.
Yeah. Yikes.
So
And you're moving from Virginia?
Yeah, moving from Virginia.
That's a big change.
Yeah,
too.
it was a bit of a change.
Culturally.
Culturally, a huge change,
Yeah.
which I appreciate the culture of the capital region. So that was very, it was soothing to me.
Yeah.
I think that people here can be very direct, and I appreciate that.
Yes.
So that was one of the nice things. But the people here have been super friendly. When I got here, one of the first musicians I connected with was this guy, Eric Hartman, who I didn't really realize he was in the capital region. I knew he was in a region called Delmar when I lived in Chicago about 10 years ago.
We call it Socialist Delmar.
Socialist Delmar, yeah. So I got in touch with him, and then he informed me that the guy that I was collaborating with at the time, Holland Hobson, was actually used to live in Albany and worked at RPI. And so that was just really odd. And then they both, Eric is a social worker. He's the director of the University of Albany's grad program in social work. And then Holland is married to a social worker. So that was interesting because my wife is a social worker too. So it was good to connect and,
On a couple different levels.
On a couple different levels. Yeah.
Awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
And so I know we were talking ahead of the gig you played just before Basilica Hudson.
September.
Yeah. And so you played out locally
With
and
Eric,
that was,
yeah.
the first time with your project. What was that like? I know you played a bill with people you're friends with, and it was the Lobby, right? Or was it?
It was at
Polly's
Hotel.
right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Polly's Hotel, the oldest bar in Albany. So that was really fun. The guy who books shows there, Jay Crack, he's a guy that I knew from the North Country in the mid '90s, and I was good friends with him back then. So it was really fun to see him again, connect with him over a shared interest in music, and made it really easy to set up the show. Insect Arc are my friends from New York City, or they're from all over, but they're primarily located in New York City. They were coming through. I told them that if they wanted a show, that I'd help them out.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you for
Albany's
doing
in
that.
such a great place for being. It's like between New York and Montreal, so you'd think it would be
Right.
like this really easy place to stop on tour.
Exactly. Yeah. I took a trip to Montreal recently and ended up talking to this band, and they're like, "Oh, you're from You're from New York? Where are you from?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm from like the Albany area." And they're like, "Oh, it's actually closer for us to go than
Yeah.
pretty much anywhere else that's worth playing in Canada." Like they're like, it's be better to go down to Albany than to go to like Toronto or something.
Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah, it's a good spot for people
Yeah.
to make that middle jump and then continue doing sort of a northeastern tour where they would have those kind of places to play, like Philly and Chicago and stuff like that, just to keep going.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
So huge opportunity for the Albany area.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's why I used to live in Buffalo about 20 years ago, and I loved living there because it's this strategic location between
Right.
New York and getting to Chicago. And of course you can play like Cleveland on the way too, and that's sometimes okay. But the bands that are playing the bigger cities. So I'd see all these really like these bands that would only play bigger cities would sometimes stop in Buffalo. Like
Yeah.
Love stopped and played in Buffalo, and that was rad,
Well,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about your musical influences growing up in this area and sort of how it brought you to where you are today as a musician in this
Yeah.
sort of wildly experimental space that you're in.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting story. So, growing up in the North Country, there's really like the only thing that you can hear is you turn the radio on in the mid 90s, and it was like listening to the really not the most moving Pink Floyd albums, and it was like listening to Rush constantly, and then
People love Rush around here.
Yeah.
I just thought of that.
yeah.
Just talking
it's true, and I mean, I'll say I shouldn't say this on tape and commit it to tape,
It's
but
happening now already.
but yeah, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to get in trouble because people know that I like heavier music.
Yeah.
But I'm not a fan of Geddy Lee's voice, or
Wow.
in fact, most of Led Zeppelin because of
Whoa.
the pitches.
Wow.
It's just something I can't take. I know it's bad, but
All right.
there it is.
Fine. You said it.
You got it off your chest.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel better?
No, we're gonna pay for it.
Oh man. But yeah.
Yeah. So growing up in the mid '90s, I would try to get out of the region. So I was into playing music, and my friends and I would go to shows in the upstate New York. I'm putting that in quotations mark because I hate that term, upstate New York, as my wife knows.
Ooh.
And yeah.
All right, we're just rolling through the hot takes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
This is
Good.
gonna be controversial.
It'll
Why
be
is that?
controversial. Because like upstate people always ask me like,
know.
where are you from? I'm like, well, I'm from, a town close to Potsdam. And they're like, where's Potsdam? Well, upstate New York. Well, it was near Buffalo, it's near
Okay.
Rochester. No, it's in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's really cold. It's really poor.
Right.
It's a weird place.
yeah, defining what upstate is, that
Yeah.
ongoing debate of
Yeah.
where do we really live
Yeah. Where do we live?
and how can people understand it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so how did you go from not enjoying the radio to discovering?
Well, I would go to punk shows all over Burlington, Montreal, Ottawa, and
Burlington must have been pretty decent back.
Yeah, those places were. I mean, going to shows in upstate New York, like Syracuse, I saw a lot of really mediocre hardcore that is apparently still popular in this area.
For sure.
And in parts of Germany, strangely.
Yes. Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And those reunions do well in Germany.
They do.
Yes. Chugga chugga. And,
chugga chugga. So that's that kind of stuff.
Oh, I'm going to get hate for that too. We're in trouble. We're
right.
wading into things that are going to get me.
Yeah. So,
fiery episode.
I'm probably going to make some people mad.
It's good.
So, and then I'd go to Canada and I'd see bands that were really good. Like the one band that was really inspiring to me was called One-Eyed God Prophecy. And they were in the kind of scene, like there's a band called Uranus. They have a lot of connections to His Hero Is Gone. Yeah. That was the stuff that I loved being around. And there was more creative music there.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'd go to shows in Syracuse, I'm gonna get some people mad. I would always see this band from Albany that was terrible.
What was it?
It was called One King Down. and now I came here and I'm like, oh my God, they're doing a reunion. Mm-hmm. And the Instagram algorithm is like telling me that I want to go to the show, and I didn't want to go to that show, but I heard about it over and over. Anyway.
I mean, there's One King Down and Earth Crisis and Stigmata and
stuff I'm not
all
into.
That stuff. Yep, that's the heritage.
Yeah, so I come to Albany, I was like, I think people are going to be really into. I hope it's not like the 90s.
But like the first episode of Portlandia, it's just Albany.
Yeah. So then there are cool people. So there's like Eric Hartman, who's doing Century Plants that I'm connecting with. And he's doing really interesting ambient music. He does all this tape loop stuff. He does great stuff with synths and guitar. There are a bunch of other people around here doing really cool stuff. So it was exciting to connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So anyway, I got into all this like Canadian hardcore. I moved to Chicago. My bandmate was an artist at the School of the Art Institute. We met over this shared love of like obscure Quebecois hardcore. And we connected. We decided I was scheduled to play a show with my metal band at the time. The show, like, for some reason we couldn't play, so I asked him to do a show with me. So we played this show. We practiced once. We mostly made it up, and it was, we got paid in like a Long Island iced tea or something really gross. Yeah, and we had fun, and we just messed around for a few years, and then we started to make albums. We started to make 7 inches and started to play out of the area. And there would be people coming in that would be, from New York and other areas, and we'd get on those bills. Yeah. Like some of my first shows playing with him, where we played with like Mouthis, who are one of a really like interesting band that broke up. It's like
they do.
Yeah, as they do. Played with them. Played with I don't know. The Coughs were a band that we played with early on, and they were a band that was like, I don't even know how to describe them. Just really avant-garde and just weirdo noise kind of music on the Load Records label when they existed. Sure. Played with like Lightning Bolt a lot. So we also had this shared love of prog rock. So growing up in the North Country, my brother lived in Montreal, and he would send me tapes of like King Crimson. So I was like, what is this? And he knew I was listening to like this, some pretty good hardcore, but mostly like, also bad hardcore.
Yeah.
That, on my diet of going to shows was limited. So he got me into King Crimson. He gave me this tape that was like their album Discipline and 3 of a Perfect Pair. And he was like, check this out. There are no synthesizers used on this album. It's all guitar. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And then, it just got me into being into prog rock. And then I later had this deep love affair with the band Genesis, which people cringe, but I don't care.
Why not?
I even
Yeah.
like the Phil Collins stuff.
Oof.
Yeah.
It's a big commitment. Yeah, my dad's British, and he, he wasn't in my life consistently, but we'd have visits and stuff. And one time he was visiting, and I had I can't dance, and he's like, "Oh, I know those blokes."
Yeah.
I'm like, sure you do, Dad. But he was very happy that Genesis was,
Yeah.
was
It was a thing.
yeah,
Rad.
But anyway,
Yeah. So Terrence and I, we basically we're a duo for about 5 years, and then we made one album that had a lot of our friends playing on it. This guy Mark Soltroff, who was in this power electronics group called Bloody Minded, still around. We had this guy Blake Judd from Knockmistium collaborated on it. Bruce Lamont, and then we had a drummer who plays in this band called Velnius, who are like a mid-tempo black metal band. So that was our first kind of experience playing with a drummer in the group. And we after we did that album, we decided we want a drummer who really approached things from more of an experimental perspective. So there was this guy in the area named Stephen Hess, who was probably my favorite drummer. He played in this group called Pan American, which is very ambient, and the guy that does Pan American, the main member, Mark Nelson, was in this group called Le Bradford, which I kind of hate post-rock, but he's one of maybe the founders of post-rock as a genre. But it's actually a very good project, and I like Le Bradford and some post-rock, I guess.
Yeah.
But Steven was a really interesting drummer, and he started playing with us, and we made this album called The Crystal World with him, and we were all really happy playing together. So
It stuck.
we moved from being a duo to being a trio.
Nice.
Yeah.
and so now, the band is sort of, you're all in different places, and you record. Have all your albums traditionally been done in that sort of?
No.
Okay.
So initially we were all in Chicago.
Right.
I guess we all lived in the same city for about 7 years, and then the other member, the founding member, Terrence, moved to Baltimore. He took a job being a faculty at an arts college. So then we started doing our albums on Relapse, and we were remote. So essentially our first album on Relapse that was for Relapse, not released by Relapse or recorded previously, we wrote it essentially, 2 days before we went into Electrical Audio Studio. And then we recorded it, and that's personally that first album we did for Relapse is probably my favorite, the way it turned out.
Do you feel like you guys worked better under pressure? I feel like it's a similar story to
question.
Sort of your first show that you played with him. So it's like, was that part of the way that you guys could create together, or?
We have approached creating from so many different perspectives, and that's almost how our music emerges. So personally, it's not my preferred method of recording an album is being under pressure.
Right.
But it works. It seems to have worked for us.
Yeah.
And what does it mean now to be on a label like Relapse, given the state of the industry? And I assume you're not, you're making money hand over fist. But what's the? What are the economics involved? How do you consider when it's time to make a new album? Given that this is more of a a passion project, I would assume in some ways. But you've got a label that clearly has cachet.
Yeah. Well, it's really nice to be on Relapse because it's like they're like your friends,
right?
And they actually, as much as they release an eclectic bunch of music, they really like the stuff that we're doing, and they encourage us to do the things that we are already doing, and they kind of facilitate us doing that even better, or allowing us to focus on that stuff.
Very
and they're
cool.
not. Yeah, so they don't put a lot of pressure on us. They let us have our artistic vision. It's our record is never going to sound like something like Dying Fetus, and they're cool with that. Dying Fetus is from this area, right?
Yeah,
No. It's another.
Who is it? Skinless are from here.
Skinless. Okay,
yes.
so Skinless is the band.
But
I
they
was
played
thinking
with,
of.
yeah.
So we're never going to
Yes.
sound like Skinless.
Right.
As much as, early on when we started, we were in, like Obituary was one of our influences. I love Obituary. And now I'm on a label with Obituary, which is so exciting.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not, our stuff is never going to sound like Obituary and never should.
Yeah. I mean, and Relapse is a label, though, obviously, like, they've got a band like Nothing who, goth, sort of like
Gothy.
grunge, almost throwback to,
Right.
the heaviest of heavy. And, it's interesting. And, a
Yeah.
band like Zombie or something, which is just pure synth. But anyway, yeah, I mean, they're known for metal, but they do
Totally.
support a number of, genres. But so you mentioned that you are working on an album, right? That is...
Yeah, we're currently working on an album, which it's always different. Like we've jammed a few times since our last album, which was released in 2015.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's been a little while.
Yeah.
Which is good because it's too much for me to release an album every week.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's sort of one of the things I keep running into with professional creatives is I wonder when, I mean, obviously you're in academia.
Right.
They've got a full-time job and they're looking to support their family and things like that. But how do you balance that commitment to your art and without burning out? And I mean, obviously you've sustained this project for quite a long time without feeling like, you aren't committing enough, or so-and-so isn't bringing enough to the table.
Yeah.
How has that worked? I mean, has it been natural, or has it been more of an experiment as you've...
So has it been natural to slow down my pace of releases?
Well, I mean, I guess just your relationship with the other members and deciding that, hey, we're not going to do an album every year. This is...
I mean...
Like, sort of like marathon more than a sprint kind of situation.
Right.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was... So Locrin, when we started in 2005, we kind of started slow. We had a few releases. They were all limited, hand numbered. And then when it got to be around 2007, we started to make a lot of prolific releases. So we would release CDRs, tapes, lathe cuts, 8 tracks, VHS. We did a VHS that was limited.
We like those here.
Yeah, you like the... Yeah, you actually do. It's like the garage sale capital of the world here.
Well, there's a local label, B-Side, that does cassettes, and they just put out last year, the VHS project, which was pretty neat. There's some experimental stuff going on, and it's interesting, but...
pretty cool.
Yeah.
That
Anyway,
was a good one.
Sweet. Yeah, I got to check
It's like
that out.
3 hours long or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's fun. Yeah.
So we got to the point where we had, people would write about us and they'd be like, oh, they're so prolific. And I was kind of thinking to myself, like, well, we're not really that prolific. We've just kind of repackaged a lot of things in different ways. Mm-hmm. But really, we were pretty prolific because we did release a lot. And that was fun. And mailing stuff to people around the world is really enjoyable because you get to connect with people that you maybe wouldn't expect.
Yeah, definitely.
Develop relationships with them. But then it got to be more like, well, why are we releasing so much stuff? Mm-hmm. And for me, slowing down it enabled me to be more intentional. And it enabled us to be more intentional with what direction, what statement we kind of want to make. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that next time we have our album out, people will write and they'll be like, oh, the prolific, Locran, who've released 30 some tape CDRs and blah, blah, blah. But
yeah. So how has that intention changed over time for the band?
Well, I think so. The intention that, if we go back to our mission statement, so it goes back to like when Terrence and I were growing up in the 90s and we were in the hardcore scene.
Yeah.
And the hardcore scene had all these really simple, overly simplistic solutions to problems. Like, oh, there are environmental issues. You need to go vegan. Like, nah, it's not quite that simple.
Yeah.
And so there would be bands like One King Down and Earth Crisis who would say like, okay, you need to go vegan and you need to stop treating your body like a a junkyard.
Right.
And really, we thought that was just overly simplistic, and we started making music that was intentionally not meant to be direct. So all of our music has some kind of environmentalist slant to it, but it's more like trying to get people to reflect on those issues. So our last album, Infinite Disillusion, it was inspired by this woman, Elizabeth Colbert's book, The Sixth Extinction, which argues that humanity is going through this sixth extinction on the planet. So we had the dinosaurs, and now different things are going extinct at an alarming rate, like bats, frogs, and it was meant to create reflection about that issue that doesn't really have a clear-cut answer.
Right.
So going vegan is not going to solve all the problems, but maybe
it makes you feel better.
it maybe makes somebody feel better, and it helps them develop a sense of community. Like definitely being like vegan in the North Country, it helped me develop a sense of community in the 90s because most people are not.
Definitely.
So, it creates this like us and them kind of relationship, which I've tried to think about. The environment is us, and
it's true. Wow.
So the one of the other things, we talked briefly about you spending time in Virginia, and you just had this large experimental project there in this facility that isn't dissimilar, although it's not MPAC, but it's similar. Can you tell us about how that came to be and what it was like working in this sort of unique sound environment there? Yeah.
So I met this faculty. I was doing a presentation about essentially like how to improve the curriculum to the music department at Virginia Tech. And somebody mentioned that I was a musician. I play, weird music. So one of their faculty introduced himself to me, this guy, Charles Nichols, who's a violinist and a composer, went to Eastman, so he has some kind of relationship with, quote unquote, upstate New York. And we connected. We shared a lot of love of similar prog rock. And he and I collaborated on a proposal to the Institute for Creative Technology. I forget the acronym is, but it's something like that at Virginia Tech. And we incorporated 3 musicians, so myself, Charles on violin, and this guy Holland Hobson, former RPI staff member and now faculty at the University of Alabama, who plays banjo. As well as 2 visual artists. So we had a creative technologist and then also an architect. So, So we had this about a year to create a project, which we called Bad Star, to perform at the Moss Art Center's Cube. And the Cube is, from what I understand, it's a similar space to what MPAC is. So it's like a 4-story performance space. And there are just speakers all around the location. So it just offers a lot of possibility for controlling the sound, which was cool.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So we just finished 3 performances at Virginia Tech, and those went really well. The art that was included in that performance was just really amazing. I'm really excited about that.
Is there a website folks go to check it out, or is there a repository of any of this that people could?
Yeah, it's unfortunately the promotions for this event have not really done it justice. I don't think, and that's why I think that was so important to be experienced at that location.
Yeah, right.
So there's some pictures that have turned out really well that are on Charles' Facebook page, which nobody's available to.
So just like out there.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, technically it is.
Technically, it's
everything
public.
on the internet is there forever.
Yeah.
Careful, guys.
Technically. So. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's cool that things just live in their own space, and then that's what it is.
Yeah.
When it comes to a performance, especially, it's like you can't. Sometimes even just recording it or talking about it afterwards doesn't really do it justice because it just was what it was.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So not that it's like a new thing at all. Obviously, you got, but your early approach to Locrian is very similar to a lot of what, bands now are sort of forced to do in some ways, at least the smart ones.
Yeah.
Because you're not selling a million albums, but you are, producing this content, creating personal relationships and represses and things like that, or get lots of attention because the fanship builds and that record's rare for a while.
Yeah.
Everyone hunts it, and then suddenly it's available. And obviously your side project Lake Violet or Lake Violet was through Gilead Media,
Correct.
which is a small label that obviously does a lot of these pressings, and they're in all the top end of the year metal, reviews, mentions and all. But what is your take on sort of the state of the music industry and creative? Do you see it going towards more of that natural, grassroots approach, or what's your take on where things go now?
I have no idea. All I know is how I feel.
Yeah.
And for a while, I was really addicted to using Apple Music, and it was really fun that you could just have anything at your fingertips. But it also kind of made me feel really sad because I just didn't really develop a relationship with the music that way.
Right.
Like I felt like I did with a physical version of something. So I imagine that the music industry is going to go more in that subscription kind of based trajectory, and that's too bad, because I think for people who've never experienced music in another way, then I think that they're missing out on something.
Yeah. I do think there's a good pocket of people who are actively rebelling against that, though, too, in terms of people who are, I guess, in a sense, like moving backwards and like digging out those vinyls, or like going back to tapes and like trying to hold on to something, and like people who are making pieces of art that go with a I know bands around here will like make a zine and then like put a little download thing in it. So it's like you can listen to it, but you also have something that was created by the artist and that they intentionally made to go with their music. So it's like there are people who are trying to play both and then going back all the way. It's just like, I don't know. I feel like we're always going to need that kind of connection that you're talking about. And that even though these playlist type sound, I don't know, I was gonna say SoundCloud, but I meant Spotify, like Spotify type sites, I mean, they're gonna be there and they're gonna keep building, but I think people are always gonna be looking for something that they can like keep and be like, look at all of the music that I have, like the collection of things and fan art and all that stuff. It's valuable.
To go back to Basilica Hudson, but the recent Courtney Love event, I got to meet Joe Mamonitzberg, the guy who designed her or worked with Hole on that album, and spent some time with him in Catskill. But the idea that he was this creative director for Interscope and then Arista, and his mission was to sort of help these people realize their album designs and their package designs, and but I realized that. That's obviously what I loved about albums, but the bands that I do really enjoy now, I want their entire artistic vision, and it actually means something to me that they're doing it themselves, or they have, they have these photographers they work with whose art I learned, I sort of get involved in, or they, they use this old 18th century, painter in all their work, and it's it leads to more personal feeling and more discovery and more, you're keyed into more culture. And so in some ways it's nice to see that flourish and not a larger mainstream consolidation or interpretation of that. But the idea that there used to be someone who, designed these amazing and had this budget to, it was Courtney Love said with, that she was talking to Lana Del Rey, and Lana Del Rey was asking about the shoot for whichever whole video from that era with the trees on fire in Malibu. And, she's like, well, that was CGI, right? And Courtney Love said, no, sad girl, I told her, no, that was budget, bitch. Sad girls don't get budgets anymore. And I thought that was just hysterical because, obviously things have changed. But the idea of, it being an art past just what you listen to is, I think, very important.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so the one of the things that we sort of talked about is you've worked with a lot of other folks. Mm-hmm. You've got some projects sort of in the can, or other folks you collaborate with.
Yeah, definitely.
How important is that to you to switch up your normal partners and creative partners and to work?
That's a good question. I mean, for me, it's a lot of it is about like connecting with people that I'm friends with, and just that's what music has always been to me.
Yeah.
So it's important for me, but it's also important for me to develop that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like with Locrian, initially it was just 2 members, and then we started collaborating with a lot of people. And then we kind of got pigeonholed into being these guys who collaborate with everyone, and we consciously stopped doing that. So the last few albums, it's just been the 3 of us primarily. Mm-hmm. And if there's been anyone additional on the album, it's been very closely. They've been playing things that have been very closely coordinated by the 3 of us.
Yeah. That's interesting
Yeah.
to be pigeonholed into the people who collaborate with everyone.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Well, right now
like-
in the metal industrial scene, The Body are this band that collaborates with like everyone.
Right.
That's what they do, and I think to some extent it's because their own material is very hard to swallow for a mainstream audience. However, the people they pair themselves with, suddenly it becomes it sort of is imbued with their their textures.
Yeah.
And, but it's not as abrasive and scary as their
Yeah,
own stuff.
definitely.
But it's interesting that that people actually seek that out. But anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, I think it's a great way to challenge yourself musically.
Yeah.
So, for instance, with Bad Star, that was collaborating with 2 musicians that I've never collaborated with, a violinist and a banjo player, who also incorporate different other sounds.
Yeah, and styles.
And we wrote that music remotely. So we had like scores, and we practiced virtually. So we would every Tuesday we would get online and we would perform at the same time, which was really weird.
It's amazing. I'm so old.
Any lagging issues?
There was, we fixed it.
Skype.
We fixed it for the most part. Yeah.
Nice.
It wasn't bad.
Cool.
I mean, of course, we're playing like kind of swampy drone.
Right.
So that makes it a little
like,
easier.
Yeah.
Man, now I have all these ideas.
Right?
Yeah.
It's time to make that drone album over the internet.
It's time. Yeah. But I mean, it's been I've had a few slow years with music, and that was very intentional too, because it just felt like I wanted to have a good answer to the next time I release something. I want to know why I'm doing that.
Cool.
So that's why I'm getting excited about recording some more Locrian. And if that's released next year or the year after or in 5 years, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Or maybe I do. But I want to have at least a good answer to the why question before we do that. And obviously, like, all sorts of stuff has happened in the world since then. And it's scary.
Yeah. And probably will be happening today and tomorrow and the next day. So
yeah, probably.
This is a lot to deal with.
Yeah. Like, I mean, of course, you've got like Trump saying that these forest fires in California are not are a result of poor forest management. When it's like, oh my God, like that's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
I've been,
deep, dense iceberg.
Yeah.
I read some of the
That's
conspiracy theories this morning about the fires, and anyway,
Yeah.
it was a scary. Yeah, it's a scary world.
Yeah, it is a scary world. So
Yeah.
But on a positive note, folks will be able to read some of your insights into being a creative, a musician with so many different interests, and I think your insight is really helpful to folks who might want to pursue this sort of life where you're continue to be creative, but you actually you hold down a real job, which sort of sucks because that's what it's coming to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
real, and I say real, quotations, but what should people look for from you next? I mean, Locrian doesn't have a timeline at this point, but
we have a fuzzy timeline.
Yeah.
So our plans are in sometime this year is to go into electrical audio in Chicago and work with Greg Norman, who's worked with us in the past on an album. Greg's worked with a lot of different people.
yeah. And just Locrian, you can find your records, anywhere with Relapse. But do you have a recommended way should people visit Locrian.com, or is there a?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So my bandmate Terrence runs a label called Anathema Editions.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So he's a good place to buy stuff directly from. Relapse is a good place to buy stuff directly from as well. It's a person in the Relapse factory that sends you the records, and they're all really passionate about the stuff that they do. Gilead Media, I'm pretty sure they stock Locrian. That's a good place to buy things from. Or actually, the guy who runs Gilead Media, his web shop is called Eroding Winds. So yeah, that's a person.
I like that name.
Yeah, it's a great name.
They actually, well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but he's decided to consolidate the two because it's gotten too much to handle. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
I liked Eroding Winds better, but now apparently he's consolidated again. But he has swings. He's a guy dealing with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's, and I was a member of the subscription club this year through them, so I highly recommend visiting that. Interesting stuff. But anyway,
Yeah.
so look out for your column. Hopefully in the next few weeks, and definitely in print in January. So
Yeah.
thanks for coming by.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.